Rust, something we're all gonna have to deal with, especially, I suppose, if you own a Chevy. This is the video for my 2007 Silverado. I'm gonna put it up with the title of 2008, only to mitigate any confusion between the classic style and the old styles. I know for the 2000 to 2006 Silverados, if you look up anything about frame rust repair, there's a bunch of stuff out there. There's a bunch of parts. There's cross members. There's new shock mount supports that you can buy, and you can just bolt or weld these things right in, and it's fairly easier than what I went through having a Silverado with the new body style. Hence the title 2008. Just so anybody searching for the new body style won't have so much trouble finding something on it, because I wasn't able to find anything. So I just had to do all this myself, fabricate most of the stuff. But I'll just start off here with, obviously, you see the picture of the truck. The truck was, the first issue I had with the truck was I lost the top shock mount on the driver's side. And so I'll just kind of show you a picture of the rust here. So here's a picture of the rust. It was pretty bad. I didn't expect to see this when I took the bed off. Just getting the bed off was a bit of a pain. There's 6 bolts, 2 of them were just spinning. They had to be torched off. Eventually I did get it off, and I saw this. And I realized I was getting into something that was going to take me a lot more time than I thought it was going to take me. Overall, I think from start to finish here, I probably had about 60 to 70 hours into this truck. So just be prepared for that if you're trying to get in depth with your truck as I did throughout this video. Here's a picture of the sandblasted frame. This was, just getting to this point was a lot of work, and I'll go over it more in the video. But that's what it looked like when I was done sandblasting. And here it is with the paint finished. It came out pretty good. I used stuff called Chassis Saver. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's Pour 15, there's Chassis Saver, there's epoxy primer. There's a bunch of stuff you can use, so I'm not going to tell you that you should use Chassis Saver. I can't even really comment on it because it's only been done for a couple days, so I don't know how it stands up, and I wouldn't anyway until it was done for a year. But that's the stuff I used, and it came out pretty good. It seems to be holding up so far. It dried well, at least. But this is the finished product, and yeah. So the stuff I used here to get started is this is the sandblaster, and everything was purchased at Harbor Freight. I originally got a quote of $600 from a guy just to sandblast the frame the way the truck sat. With the bed off and the fuel tank in, he wanted $600. So I told myself, well, this is a great time to invest in a sandblaster for $100 from Harbor Freight, which I did. I did have to modify it. Here are some pictures of the modification. The only issue with this tank was the small fittings that were used. I did test blast for about an hour or two. Worked fine for about 30 minutes, and then it jammed up, which is what everybody says about these things. So I did go out and buy these fittings that you see in these pictures. They're half-inch fittings. It allowed the abrasive material to flow just fine, really, for the next 5 hours of sandblasting. And I didn't have any issues after that. So all in all, I was into this sandblaster for about $160, which to me was totally worth it. This was the paint can, also for Harbor Freight. High volume, low pressure paint gun. I bought this because I was going to be spraying upside down at all different angles, making sure I got everywhere. And the regular spray paint gun that you can get for like $15 wasn't going to cut it. So I did invest in this gun too. And that's really all the stuff I had to buy. You do have to have a lot more stuff than this. I'll show you the some rust here while I'm talking, but here's some pictures of the rust. For this project, I had those things I just showed you. I had a welder, I had a torch set, I had to go and buy metal to make some brackets, which you'll see. I needed you maybe don't need a forklift, but you need some type of lifting device, whether it's like an engine stand or something. A vacuum, and really anything else you see during this video. I was fortunate enough to work at a shop and be able to use the shop on the weekends to get this done. And it did take, like I said, almost 2 full weekends, even 3-day weekends. So, but here's the rust. It was pretty bad. Like I said, I wasn't expecting to see anything this bad. Obviously lost a spare tire. Didn't care to have a spare tire that looked like that. Wasn't sure what it would support. So I got rid of that. Here's the bed. Just a quick picture of the bed. It was not so bad. The cross sections, which I didn't get a picture of, which you can kind of see in the picture, were a little rusty. There's 3 or 4 cross sections where the bolts bolt to the bed, and they were pretty rusty. So what I had done, and I don't have pictures of it, is when I was sandblasting, I hit those too, just so I could hit it with a quick coat of paint, just to mitigate any further rust with that. And that's what that chassis saver and also that Pour 15 does. You're supposed to be able to paint it right over rust, and it's supposed to stop it in its tracks. Obviously, it's not going to stop it completely, especially with these frames. They rot from the inside out. Well, it's not necessarily just, outside of the frame that rusts. But all right, so getting into it, here are the hand brackets I had to make. So, like I said, one of the biggest issues here when searching frame rust repair for the Silverados, if you've done it already, is everything's for a 2000 to a 2006, and you can't use the 2000, 2006 top shock mounts on these on 2008 and newer Silverados. You can't do it. Obviously, you can see, or as you will see in the pictures coming up, they're angled, so it's not like straight out. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't fit on the truck. So I went out and I bought some steel. Bought a bit of steel, as you'll see, from my local scrapyard. Spent about $100. Used a torch to cut out these templates that I made. Trial and error. Each one probably took about 2 hours. But here's the finished product of the first one I had. So it was pretty good. Fit on there pretty well. Wasn't the perfect fit, but here you see it installed, and I was able to get it to work pretty well. Welds aren't the best, but the frame wasn't I wasn't able to ground the frame too well either, even with grinding it down as much as I did, as you see there. Here's another picture of it installed. So obviously I had to do that for the driver's side, because the driver's side is the side that went. That's what started all this mess, was losing that driver's side shock mount, which you probably saw in one of those first pictures there. But I did go ahead and I did I was doing all this anyway, so I went ahead and I cut the passenger side shock mount out. I did that one as well a little later. Here is the rear beam. The spare tire mount and the beam that supported that spare tire plate was completely rotted out, so I just tore those completely out. Put that back in. For me, it was more of a support issue, a stability issue, not having that rear beam back there. I didn't want to get done with this whole project and then realize, like on the highway, hitting a bump, that the rear end shook way more than I wanted it to. So I put that rear beam back in there. I did put the plate back up, just in case in the future I wanted to put a spare tire back in. I did not buy the assembly or another spare tire at this point, but I did I did put it back just for sake of keeping it as close to factory as possible. Here is a picture of an L bracket. So another picture that I wasn't able to get is the leaf spring shackles in the rear. They were both in pretty rough shape. The passenger side was really bad, so I opted to sandblast the driver's side and then just completely replace the passenger side. Those were pretty expensive. I did buy the shackle and the hanger. The hanger is what was bad, rather. And those both got replaced. I had to torch them out. It's tough torching anything on a frame that's that thin. So there were some spots I had to weld up. It was a lot of work just doing this one shackle. It was probably about 6 or 7 hours worth of work doing that shackle, or hanger rather. But I did get that done. While I was doing it, I noticed this L bracket, which I'll try to point out here, but it's that L looking bracket. I had to fabricate that from scratch because I could not find it anywhere and did not feel like waiting 2 weeks to find it online and then wait for it to get here. So I did have to fabricate that, so that took some time. That was completely disintegrated, and what that does is that holds the hanger close to the frame when you have a load in your bed. It keeps the hanger from pulling out from the truck to keep your truck more stable. So I had to fabricate that, and then after that there was a few other things just tidying up, and then I started the sandblasting. So the sandblast prep. Wow, this took a while. So as you can probably hear in my voice, I haven't been feeling too good the past couple weeks, and this just so happened to be the time that I chose to start this project. But for sandblasting, you definitely need anything and everything you can think of. You need earmuffs, you need goggles, you need a face shield, you definitely need some sort of respirator to not be breathing this stuff in. I had to get the very fine abrasive material for the sandblaster I had, and it did work pretty well, so I'm glad I did. But then you need, boots, long sleeves, because this stuff hurts and it gets everywhere, and it really does get everywhere. So if you are going to do something like this, make sure you do it outside, and make sure cleanup's pretty easy, or cleanup's not going to be a problem, because it gets everywhere. With that being said, you don't have to sandblast, and I think that's a very important part of me making this video, is letting you guys know that you do not have to sandblast. You can just take a wire brush and clean the entire frame with a wire brush. That was an option for me. I chose to take my time and do it this way, just because I thought that it would be the best way for me. When you use things like Chassis Saver or Pour 15 and stuff like that, that's meant to be painted right over rust, they actually prefer that you just take a wire brush, and that you just knock off all the loose stuff, with a hammer and a wire brush, and you paint it right over the rust. They want you to do that. I sandblasted, and it was way more time consuming, and who's to say that it'll hold any better than just taking a wire brush to the frame. It does say on the Chassis Saver can that I purchased that sandblasting is recommended. I think it's funny that they say that, because right on the front of the can of Chassis Saver it says paint right over rust. So yeah, there's stuff that sticks to bare metal way better than Chassis Saver. So I think if you're going to sandblast, then maybe look into something that isn't designed to be painted right over rust. But that's just my opinion. But anyway, moving on. Here's another picture of just the sandblasting prep and just the mess, really. What do you see here? You see the vacuum, you see the forklift, you see the bed, and it's just, and you got to be careful too. You got to make sure that you're not hitting anything you don't want to. I wish that I had, and you'll see in the paint pictures coming up, that I had used plastic, obviously, all around the cab and the bumper in the bed where I didn't want paint. I wish I had done that before I sandblasted, because the abrasive material gets everywhere, and then getting it off is a pain in the butt. And if you even use a sponge to get it off, it will scratch your paint. Luckily, I had a power washer, so add that to the list of equipment and tools. Add that to the welder, to the torch set, to the forklift, to the sandblaster, to the paint gun that you needed to get this job done. But yeah, I definitely recommend doing that if you're going to sandblast. And yeah, having a vacuum. I used that vacuum to get inside the frame, to get all the sand that made its way down into the frame rails, along with the rust and everything else that was down there from the last 11 years of this frame rusting. And here it is done. This is the finished product. This is after I cleaned up. I cleaned it. I think they recommend you washing down the frame with some degreaser. And they're pretty specific about what kind, and then to let it dry. I just used brake cleaner. It's what I've always used before paint. It's always worked pretty well. And then this truck sat for 2 days before I painted it, so I wasn't worried about any of it not drying up, even though brake cleaner dries up pretty fast. While I was sandblasting, I found this hole in the support. This is the support closest to the rear of the cab, and this is just how bad the rock can get. It's just insane. There was a rat's nest in there. You can still see all that tar there. The tar was not really a problem until I got under the cab. The tar was still pretty thick, and that's where obviously the frame wasn't as bad as far as rust goes. But the back, from the cab back, where all the rust was, all the tar was gone. There was some thick spots. The sandblaster took it right off. Here, the sand just kind of stuck to the tar, as you can kind of see. So I didn't really bother sandblasting or spraying much of that. I did go over this quick with that paint, but not too thick because there wasn't a lot of prep that I could do with that tar. But I did clean it up, and that's just kind of some stuff that I found. Luckily, this support beam was not supporting anything. I think it's there for maybe a different model, maybe a model with a shorter cab. I obviously have the 4 doors, the 4 full-size doors, so maybe that's used for one of the other models. But it's just an example of some stuff you might find. It's crazy the stuff you find when you sandblast. Here's a quick fix on the fuel tank beam, which I'm sure you saw in the other pictures how that hole was there. It didn't seem too bad before I dropped the fuel tank, and then I dropped the fuel tank, and it's just really bad the way they designed a lot of the stuff on this truck, and even the 7 years before this truck came out. Because moisture just sits on top of that fuel tank and just eats that beam, as you can see. So this was one section that I repaired on that beam. There was another one underneath. I didn't get a photo of. The welds weren't so good. I was running out of argon gas in my welder. Carried me all the way to the end, up until this point, right before paint. I was doing this right before paint. But this is the stuff you're going to have to do. You want to get everything done, everything prepared and prepped and fixed the right way before you put this paint on. Especially if it's a good paint, because the paint doesn't come off easy, and repairing anything afterwards is a pain in the butt. But here is the plastic prep before paint, or right before paint. It took a while. I got all the plastic from Harbor Freight too. Maybe spent like $20. Geez, not even on all that plastic. Taped it off. Take your time. You don't want to miss anything. You don't want to leave a spot where that paint can get in, because it does not come off. It doesn't come off your skin, this Pour 15 and this chassis saver stuff, and it certainly won't come off the paint of your car without damaging the paint in the process. So, and here is some pictures of the finished product finally. So I did 2 coats of this stuff. It was about 85 degrees this day, really humid. I think 80% relative humidity, which is good for this paint. The more moisture in the air, the faster, the better this stuff dries. So they recommend like 3 to 5 hours in between the first and second coat. I think I went maybe like 2.5 because of how humid it was. It dried rather quick. So I did 1 coat. Took about 10 to 15 minutes to do the first coat. 2.5 hours later, I did the second coat. Laid it on just as heavy. I've watched videos of people only using like a quart doing a job like this. I used damn near a whole gallon doing just the rear part of this frame here. So obviously it was I laid it on pretty thick, but it still took well. It wasn't too thick. It didn't start to bubble or anything or peel off. So and I'd rather it be thick than I'd rather it be too heavy than too thin in some spots. So here's just another picture of the paint done, and here is it all done, all together, all done. That's the finished product. I put new tires on it too. Yeah, so that was the conclusion of 60 to 70 hours worth of work, which I thought was just going to be a shock mount until I took my bed off. But I hope this video helps you guys. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments or message me, and I'll try to answer your questions as best as I can. But this is just hopefully give you guys a rough idea of what it's going to take to do the job yourself. I mean, all in all, I think with all the parts, and of course I had to buy a fuel pump too, and that was a huge cost. That was about $300. But even with that, I think I was into this job for about $1,000, $1,100. I would say you could certainly do it for $500 or $600 if you're getting into it. If you're getting into a job like this, but if you go anywhere else, you're paying $3,000 to $4,000. So if I can do a job like this for $1,000 and save myself $3,000 and have the same product, it's good for me, guys. So thanks for watching, and any questions, leave them below. Thanks.